The Brotherhood of Steel was ready to celebrate Halloween. It had been a long year, and the Brotherhood members were looking forward to the festivities. The celebration was to take place at an abandoned airport. It had been a long time since the airport had seen any activity, and so it was the perfect spot to hold a secret party. The Brotherhood had spent weeks preparing for the event. They had collected costumes, decorations, food, and other supplies from the different locations they had scavenged throughout the year. The night of the celebration was upon them. The Brotherhood members had gathered in the airport hangar and were ready to begin. The first order of business was to hand out the costumes. Everyone had their own unique look, whether it was a knight, a scribe, or something in between. Once the costumes were distributed, the party was officially underway. The knights and scribes danced, drank, and mingled with one another. There was a lot of laughter and good-natured ribbing, and the mood was high. The celebration went on until the early hours of the morning. As the sun began to rise, the partygoers slowly made their way out of the abandoned airport. The Brotherhood had made a lot of memories that night, but the best part was that they had come together to celebrate the holiday season. They had all shared in the joy of the festivities and had made a lot of new friends. The Brotherhood of Steel had shown the world that they were not just a bunch of warriors, but a group of people who could come together and have a good time. The next day, the Brotherhood members returned to their daily lives, but the memories of the Halloween celebration stayed with them. They would remember the good times they had shared and the friendship they had made that night. The Brotherhood of Steel was the epitome of brotherhood, and Halloween was their chance to show it. They had proved that they could come together and have a good time, even in a post-apocalyptic world. The sky was overcast, and the air was thick with smoke, the smell of burning wood and the ash of the nearby wasteland. The sound of a few scattered gunshots, and the laughter of the Minutemen echoed off the walls of the abandoned church, as they gathered around the bonfire, in the center of the room. It was Halloween, and the Minutemen had decided to celebrate. After a hard few weeks dealing with the threats of the wasteland, they thought it was the perfect time to relax and have a good time. The leader of the group, a tall, grizzled man by the name of Jonas, had been the one to suggest the gathering. He said it was a time to celebrate their victories, and to remember those who had been lost in the fight. The others had quickly agreed, and they had set about preparing for the occasion. They had gone out into the wasteland and scavenged what they could, gathering materials to make decorations, food, and costumes. They had set up a few tables in the church and lit a few candles for some light. With the decorations in place, it was time to get the party started. Jonas had brought out some old records he had found in a nearby abandoned house, and soon the church was filled with music and laughter. The Minutemen had all gone, all out with their costumes. Some had dressed up as ghouls and ghosts, while others had gone for a more classic look with witches' hats and black cloaks. The group had brought some food as well, and they had set up a makeshift bar with some of the alcohol they had scavenged. They had all gathered around the bonfire, talking and laughing, and soon the party was in full swing. It was a night of fun and relaxation, and the Minutemen were enjoying every minute of it. As the night wore on, the group began to disperse, some heading home for the night, while others decided to stay a little longer and enjoy the festivities. The party eventually died down, and the group left the church, leaving the decorations behind. The next morning, the Minutemen woke up feeling refreshed and energized. They had celebrated the previous night, but now it was time to get back to work. They had dealt with the threats of the wasteland, and now it was time to celebrate their victory. The Minutemen had come together to celebrate Halloween, but now it was time to continue to fight for a better tomorrow. Support from the Brotherhood of Steel. The railroad had been planning this Halloween celebration for weeks. It had taken a lot of hard work to pull it off, but they were finally ready. The railroad had spent the last few months freeing a large number of synths, and had recently received some much-needed support from the Brotherhood of Steel. The railroad had always been a close ally of the Brotherhood, so they were eager to help with the preparations for the Halloween party. The party was to be held in the old abandoned train station, which had been converted into a makeshift headquarters for the railroad. The station was decorated with colorful streamers, pumpkins, and other festive decorations. A large banner reading Happy Halloween hung from the ceiling. A DJ was playing a mix of classic and modern music, and several of the railroad members had put together a dance routine that everyone was eager to try out. The celebration was off to a great start. At one point in the evening, the railroad's leader, Desdemona, made a speech to the gathered crowd. She thanked everyone for their hard work and dedication, and expressed her gratitude for the help they had received from the Brotherhood of Steel. She also thanked the synths they had freed for their courage and resilience in the face of adversity. The crowd cheered and clapped in response, and then it was time for the main event, trick-or-treating. A large number of the railroad members, dressed in their best Halloween costumes, took turns going door to door in the station, handing out candy and other treats. They were met with many smiles and laughter as they made their rounds. After the trick-or-treating was finished, there was a costume contest. Every costume was unique and creative, from a synth dressed as a scarecrow, to a railroad member as a post-apocalyptic zombie. The judges had a hard time picking a winner, but in the end, the synth dressed as a scarecrow was declared the victor. The celebration continued late into the night. The music was loud, the laughter was contagious, and the Halloween spirit was in the air. The railroad had pulled off an amazing celebration, and everyone was excited about what the future held. As the party began to wind down, the railroad members said their goodbyes. They had accomplished so much in such a short amount of time, and they were all looking forward to continuing their work in the coming months. With the Halloween festivities over, the railroad prepared to turn their attention to the next task, helping the recently freed synths find a new home. It was a difficult challenge, but the railroad was determined to make it happen. Thanks to the support of the Brotherhood of Steel and the hard work of the railroad, the synths were well on their way to a better life. It was a happy ending to a long and difficult journey, and the railroad could not have asked for more. The sun had just started to set on the horizon when the people of Sanctuary Hills began to gather in the town square. It was a special day for the small community, one that they had been preparing for weeks in anticipation. Halloween in Sanctuary Hills. The town had been through a lot since the war, but the people had persevered, rebuilding their homes and lives from the destruction. They had finally decided that such a special day should be celebrated with enthusiasm and joy, and so the preparations had begun. The town square was decorated with festive banners, pumpkins, and cobwebs. A large bonfire had been built in the center, and the children were gathered around it, eagerly waiting for the festivities to begin. The adults had set up a variety of activities and games for the children to enjoy, from bobbing for apples to pin the tail on the donkey. There was even a haunted house set up at the edge of the square, complete with fake cobwebs and spooky decorations. As the sun set, the townspeople lit the bonfire and began the festivities. The children were delighted to see the familiar faces of their neighbors, and soon the whole town was dancing, singing, and laughing together. The adults had brought out an array of treats, from candy apples to popcorn balls, and the children eagerly devoured them. Later in the evening, the adults had a few surprises of their own, a costume contest and a spooky storytelling session. The costume contest was a huge hit among the children, and they all competed to show off their creative costumes. The adults were also in the spirit of the holiday, and dressed up in their own costumes, from witches to ghosts. The storytelling session was equally popular, and the adults regaled the children with tales of monsters, ghouls, and scary creatures. The dark night sky seemed to add to the atmosphere, and the children shivered with delight. At the end of the night, everyone gathered around the bonfire once more to share stories and thank each other for the wonderful evening. As the flames of the bonfire slowly died down, the children and adults of Sanctuary Hills all smiled, knowing that this Halloween had been one of the best they had ever experienced. The people of Sanctuary Hills had been through a lot, but this night had reminded them that no matter what happened, they would always be safe and happy in their little town. As the clock struck midnight, the people of Sanctuary Hills finally returned to their homes, their hearts full of joy and love. They had spent an unforgettable night together, and the memories of their Halloween in Sanctuary Hills would remain in their hearts forever. It was Halloween in Goodneighbor, and the normally bustling streets were dead silent. The bright lights of the neon signs that usually lit up the night sky were all dark. The only sound was the wind, howling through the streets, carrying a chill with it. The day had started off uneventful as any other, but by the evening, the citizens of Goodneighbor had all disappeared, as if by some unseen force. There was no sign of life, no sound of laughter, or music, or children playing. At first, some had thought it was just a prank or a Halloween tradition, but soon, the truth emerged. There was a sinister force at work in Goodneighbor. Halloween was a special night in the Fallout universe. It was a night when the ghosts of the past came out to haunt the living. It was a night when the spirits of the dead roamed the streets, looking for unsuspecting victims. It was no wonder then, that the people of Goodneighbor had fled in fear. They had heard the stories, seen the signs, and felt the presence of the supernatural. It was a night to be feared and respected. But there was one brave soul who stayed behind. His name was Nimrod, and he was a scavenger. He had been living in Goodneighbor for years, and he knew the streets like the back of his hand. He had heard the stories, too, but he wasn't afraid. He knew there was no danger in this night, only an opportunity. He was determined to find out what had happened in Goodneighbor, to find out why everyone had left. Nimrod walked through the streets, looking for any clues that might lead him to the truth. He was cautious, but also brave. He knew that in a place like this, danger lurked around every corner. As he walked, he heard a noise coming from a nearby alleyway. It sounded like a low moan, like the sound of someone in pain. He followed the sound and soon came upon a group of ghouls. They had been huddled together in a dark corner, trying to stay out of sight. They were terrified, and Nimrod could see the fear in their eyes. He approached them cautiously, and they told him their story. It seemed that a powerful witch had cast a spell on Goodneighbor, trapping everyone inside her realm on Halloween night. She was determined to take revenge on the people of the city for harming her in the past. The ghouls had managed to escape, but the rest of the citizens were still trapped in the witch's realm. Nimrod knew he had to act quickly if he wanted to save them. He thanked the ghouls for their help and ran off into the night. He searched through the witch's realm, looking for any sign of the citizens of Goodneighbor. Finally, he found them, all huddled together in a dark corner, too afraid to move. He helped them escape, and soon they were back in the streets of Goodneighbor. The citizens were relieved to be back home, and they thanked Nimrod for his bravery. The next morning, the citizens of Goodneighbor awoke to find that the witch had been banished, and all of the neon signs had been relit. It was as if nothing had ever happened. The citizens of Goodneighbor had learned an important lesson that night: no matter how dark the night may seem, there is always hope. Nimrod went on to become a legend in Goodneighbor, and every year on Halloween, the citizens of the city gathered together to remember his bravery and celebrate the courage of the human spirit.